An Empire of Ice and Fire by Longclaw 1-6, Chapter 37, Until the End of My Days. Daenerys had never seen a northern wedding until her marriage to her husband. My husband. She smiled as they sat side by side at the Lord's table. The chandeliers were packed to the brim with candles, bathing the normally shrouded room in an all-encompassing yellow light. Tables were packed with revellers and drunken guests, filling on the platters of food that the servants had brought in. It was sparse compared to what Sansa had told her usually graced the Great Hall during the summer months, but even in such scarcity, everyone seemed to be enjoying themselves. Warm ale filled the mugs in front of them. Dany chuckled at how the alcohol never seemed to run out at a feast. "Enjoying yourself, your grace?" Hot breath filled her ear. Dany closed her eyes and fighting back a purr, her body filled with warmth nonetheless. "I do hope my bride is enjoying herself." Jon quite enjoyed the look of suppressed ecstasy crossing over Daenerys' face. It wasn't noticeable to the layman, the Dragon Queen wearing the mask of a generatically happy high-born woman, but Jon wasn't a layman. He knew every twitch in his wife's face, the subtle hitch of her breath and the tightening of her chest, a faint red on her cheek, belied someone entranced. Something he was quite happy to see. "I am my king," the silver-haired woman replied, looking up at Jon. She smiled, leaning in to kiss his chin. She couldn't wait to take him up to their chamber and consummate their hours-old marriage. But Dany was enjoying the feast, a moment of peace and merriment before the coming storm. Bannermen that could play an instrument had volunteered for their beloved king, mounting on a raised platform to play various tunes to entertain the guests and allow for a lively dance scene. Many had taken to the floor in the middle of bouts of drinking and feasting. Arya and Gendry were having a boisterous, merry time twirling around, the former quite rusty and the latter sporting 2 left feet. Rickon, reserved and quiet for most of the night, had managed to muster up the courage to ask Lyanna Mormont to a single dance, and both overcame their initial hesitance to have a fun time. Off the dance floor, Sansa was immersed in conversations with Missandei, while Grey Worm occasionally joined in. Tyrion was where one would expect him, engaged in a drinking contest with Tormund and Wyman Manderley, Shae acting as a referee. To little surprise on her part, her hand seemed to be ahead, especially after the red-headed wildling tossed his mug aside and pulled Lady Brienne, whose back had been turned to him, into a kiss. That brought a fist into his face, knocking him down. Dany stifled a giggle as Tormund hauled himself up and poured another mug of ale for himself with a dopey grin. Daenerys couldn't help but notice that Jon couldn't take his eyes. Not the loving, tender look of her Jon, but the hard, protective look of the King of the North, off his sister and her lover. She shook her head, stifling a laugh at his behaviour. "Jon!" She placed a hand on his cheek, pulling him away to look at her. "Stop trying to will Rhaegal to burn him alive." "I'm not." Jon watched her give him a knowing look. "Not that far at least, but—" He looked back, seeing them be all handsy. "I don't like him touching her like that." "She seems to be enjoying it." Joyous laughter written all over her face. Arya looked just like Daenerys did when sharing a moment alone with Jon. "She's my baby sister." "She's a grown woman." Staring her down, Dany smiled as Jon's gaze softened. "Don't fret, my love. You still have another Arya to be protective over." The ragtag band finished their tune. The various couples on the dance floor cleared off the spilt part. The closest to the royal couple was Arya and her dancing partner, Gendry the Smith. He bowed, and despite wearing her normal breeches, she reluctantly curtsied. Jon noticed Gendry's mouth moving, words lost over the cacophony of the hall, resulting in a punch on her shoulder from Arya. She was laughing, however, so all was good. "A toast!" Arya called out, hoisting a mug of ale into the air. "To the King and Queen!" Cheers rang through the hall as none turned down the opportunity to get drunker. Dany felt Jon pull her head close to him to kiss her hair, as modest as always in the face of recognition. The kiss felt warm and supremely comforting, as much as the Dragon Queen wished for him to kiss her elsewhere. "What time do we think the bedding ceremony will be?" Her eyes twinkled, teasing lilt to her voice as the drunken guests began laughing and whooping. Such was often the best part of a wedding. "How about now?" Jon turned to Sansa, eyebrow raised. "You two?" She smirked at him. Don't know how easy it'll be with a pecker like that. Tying Tormund for the drunkest person at the wedding, Tormund let the wildlings into a cheer. Dany blushed, knowing exactly what that particular ritual entailed. While it would be fun to see Jon squirm, her lack of modesty gave way to Jon's own strong, modest traits. Plus, it was Jon. He was special, and she wanted this night to be special. Sensing her reluctance along with his, Jon stood. There will be no bedding ceremony tonight, Lady Stark. His sisters and Tyrion laughed good-naturedly, while jeers rained down on him. However, I shall retire with my wife after this next dance. He stood, hands out. My queen, may I have this dance? Blinking, she stared at him. Dance? Jon? She didn't realise he wanted to. Of course, my king. Why would she turn down such a public offer? Taking his hand, the two slowly walked into their room on the floor below, a crowd of guests clearing a circle for them. Positioned closely, Dany dropped her voice till only he could hear. I didn't know you could dance, my love. They taught Rob, and Rob taught me, he replied, smiling softly at his bride. I couldn't deny you one dance at our wedding. But I don't know northern dances. A sudden bout of shyness overfell her, not wanting to humiliate herself in front of the northern lords. Jon laughed merrily, leaning into her ear. Just follow my lead, Dany. It'll be fine. He kissed her brow and motioned to the fiddler, who began a tune, a popular, jaunty tune that started slow but picked up speed. I love you. She gazed upon him in adoration. I love you too. A tune started up, and Dany found herself guided around the floor by her dragon wolf. She fought back the squeak bubbling up in her mouth, nearly stumbling several times at the unfamiliar movements, only to be held up by Jon's strong arms. That was so amazing wrapped around her. No! Concentrate. Willing herself, Dany focused her mind until she had a general knowledge of the steps, enough not to trip like a clumsy child. This was welcome, since that was when the dance started to pick up. Both zoomed along the dance floor, boots barely making contact with the ground, as Jon guided them to the fast pace of the tune. He could feel Dany's soft arms and trim waist flexing, muscles toned beneath from years of training and dragon riding. Watching her breaths quicken, he dipped her, his own breath hitching as he leaned down and kissed her exposed, graceful neck. She bounced back into his arms, eyes bright with excitement. Twirling her, Jon misjudged the force of his jerk at the end. Instead of a graceful slide, Dany ended up, still gracefully, thudding back into his chest as the song ended. Applause roared from the onlookers, but Dany only had eyes for Jon. It may be the dead of winter, but at this point the Dragon Queen could only feel heat radiating from her husband. Blood of the dragon. They were mere inches apart, breaths quickening hot on each other's skin. Panting, hands pressed to his chest, Dany smiled and kissed him, a kiss returned with enthusiasm. Only a good-natured jeering and a smart-ass comment from Arya brought them out of it, a blush forming on Daenerys' cheek. Taking Dany's hand, Jon returned to wave to the crowd. All right, we're turning in for the night. Feel free to continue to enjoy yourselves. He spotted Tyrion refilling his cup, stumbling a bit causing his wine to spill. The feast was not going to end soon. King in the north! Cheered some, and the chant grew as the king led his queen out of the great hall. Scuffling of their boots echoed through the empty halls. Daenerys couldn't bring herself to look up at her husband, walking alongside her. Not that she was regretting a single thing that had happened between them. The hand wrapped around his forearm sparked with electric delight, Dany's heart filling with warmth. But if that was what she looked, perhaps this was nothing more than a dream. Perhaps she would wake up back in Meereen, or worse, in Illyrio's house in Pentos, where Jon Snow was just a mere figment of her imagination. The thought brought dread to her. Is it all right, wife? My wife. Jon, stopping in the middle of the hall, felt deliriously happy, a feeling not often felt. Sensing his bride was feeling differently, he turned towards her and gently guided her hand to look at him. Dany. Hearing him say her name, voice loaded with emotion and love, Dany bit her lower lip. This is real, right? She looked away to the side. Are we really here? Together? Hand guiding the back of her head to meet his, John cupped her cheek and kissed her softly on each of her closed eyelids. Yes. Eyes opening, gazing into his grey orbs, Danny finally smiled, widely and happily. I love you, John. Leaning down to kiss her, John suddenly had a wicked thought. A small grin curled on his lips as they proceeded down the empty, torchlit hallway. Did you know that the free folk have a special tradition? Having rejected the bedding ceremony outright earlier in the week, perhaps this was the alcohol talking, or perhaps some part of him finally wanted to let go and have a little fun. Danny looked up at him with a raised eyebrow. While it doesn't doubt me, she said suspiciously. John rarely smiled mischievously like that unless they were in the throes of passion. I am unaware of any free folk traditions. Well, John's grin was unchanged. Once the warrior has emerged as the sole claimant, he steals her to his chambers. I'm not surprised, she chuckled. I could definitely see Tormund or his fellow warriors doing. Clicking in her mind, Danny's eyes went widened. John, don't you? But it was too late. Without more than a low grunt, the king in the north grabbed his bride and pulled her over his shoulder. John! She shrieked, interspersed with laughter. Put me down! This instant! No! He marched down to their chamber with a determined swagger. His bride huffed, strung up around his shoulder. Your queen demands it! Danny tried to sound regal, but it wasn't fooling anyone. Still no, by command of the king. The king is being silly! Danny shot back, trying hard to contain her smile. So long forced to accept the mantle of leadership despite their age, at this point they were simply a young couple on their wedding night. With what was facing, such nights were priceless. Watching as they made it to their room, Danny squealed as John tossed her onto the plush bed. Truly alone at last, my king. After quite the wedding night, I'm going to skip that entirely because no thank you. Knock, knock, knock. A long hiss left the Dragon Queen, as someone daring to interrupt her private time with her king. She refused to let go of John's embrace. Get the fuck away before I feed you to my dragons! She roared, causing John to chuckle. Dragon fire. Daenerys was quite amusing to him. And quite sexy. Your graces! It was Missandei, voice wavering, but audible through the door. The Lannister army is attacking Riverrun. Any hope of continuing the sensual morning was lost. John and Danny quickly transformed into king and queen, the king quickly throwing on his breeches and heading to the door. The sudden, abrupt way he yanked it open caused Missandei to involuntarily flinch. Give me the report. John's tone left no room for argument, eyes widening at the scars littering the king's chest. The translator had never seen them before. John always had at least having a tunic on when they encountered each other in the morning. Missandei nevertheless handed him the scroll, entering the chambers to attend the queen. John, much as he did enjoy such sights, was engrossed in the report. Pacing back and forth, his jaw was set in a determined scowl, eyes shifting from confused to resolved to pure rage. 7 hells! Nearly 40,000 Lannister forces laying siege to Riverrun. The Blackfish hold up inside, with 500 men. They can storm the fucking castle if they want to! Dressed being laced up, Danny was shocked at the level of fury erupting from his eyes. The dragon had awoken. 7 fucking hells! If Riverrun fell, then the land connecting to the Vale was in danger of being severed. John slammed his hand on one of the tables, the resulting slam echoing throughout the room. Quickly crossing the distance, Danny cupped his cheek. Calm yourself, my love, she whispered, following with a soft kiss. Afterwards he still seethed, but wasn't on the precipice of erupting anymore. Ghosting her hand comfortingly across his chest, Danny took the nearly crumpled parchment from his hand. Reading it, now it was her turn to anger. The King's Slayer. Jaime Lannister. Daenerys may have known about her father, may have agreed he needed to be put down like a mad dog, but this was an affront. As if Joffrey was personally taunting her. Where is Robb, with your main army? She asked John, voice hard. At the twins. Missandei! John barked, catching the attention of the translator. Both looked like the epitome of warrior king and queen. Have a raven sent there, and to Moat Cailin. Quick march to the fair market. And have the dragons readied. We're flying tonight. Daenerys met her husband's eyes. No observations needed to be made verbal. At least they had one night of bliss. one night to forget the hell all around them before they had to journey into the freezing winds and scorching fires. Without words, John pulled his wife into a fierce hug, one of powerful promise. Whatever hell they would enter, they would emerge together. End of chapter. Hi guys, hope you enjoyed this. Sorry it's shorter than normal, but as you know, I am simply not comfortable reading that kind of thing, and it's the wedding night, so you know there's going to be something there, so no thank you. Anyway, yeah, I like that there was a nice dance. I like that Daenerys is telling him to back off Gendry. I like John being a little mischievous there. That's rare and very funny. That kind of thing, you know. And of course, cliffhanger. These two cannot catch a break, can they? At all. Ho ho. If you think that now, wait till you see what comes next. Yeesh. Anyway, have a good day, night, or whatever time zone you're in. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Blah, blah, blah. Bye!